Igor Girkin, also known by the alias Strelkov. For a decade, one of the world's most wanted men, an accused war criminal, was recently back in the news when he was arrested, not by the International Criminal Court in The Hague, but instead by his former backers from Vladimir Putin's regime in Moscow. So who is Girkin, or Strelkov, and why is he important? He was a central figure of our previous videos on the history of Ukraine and Crimea, as well as the Donbass War. One of the few established facts about Girkin is that he was born December 17, 1970, in Moscow. In his youth, Girkin was reportedly obsessed with military history, particularly that of the Russian Empire. Never a supporter of communism, after the Soviet Union's fall, Girkin began writing for the far-right newspaper Zavtra, where he would make some of his most important connections. These included editor Alexander Borodai, with whom Girkin would be associated for years, and alongside whom Girkin would get his first taste of combat action. Girkin and Borodai would fight alongside the pro-Russia Transnistria separatists during the 1992 Transnistria War, as well as alongside the Serbs in the 1992-95 war in Bosnia. Girkin was later accused of participating in war crimes in Bosnia, the first but far from the last time Girkin would be connected to atrocities. It was later revealed that in 1996, Girkin began working for the FSB, Russia's Federal Security Service, the successor of the Soviet KGB and NKVD. In 1999, he was sent to Chechnya. Following Russia's successful reconquest of the breakaway republic, Girkin served as a field commander in a counterinsurgency role. There, he began using the alias Strelkov, roughly translating to shooter or rifleman. This Strelkov character was linked to several unexplained disappearances. These disappearances were investigated by the now Russian-backed Chechen authorities, who did apparently conduct a legitimate investigation, identifying the likely perpetrator as a Russian officer named Strelkov, who of course could not be found. Girkin is accused of conducting up to 6 forced disappearances of Chechen civilians. None of the disappeared have ever been seen again. This actually worked against the goals that Girkin was ostensibly trying to achieve, fueling further Chechen terrorism and resistance to Russian rule. The sister of one of the suspected victims would later engage in a suicide bombing of a Russian domestic airliner carrying passengers, killing 43 in an ominous foreshadowing of Girkin's own future crimes. Meanwhile, the victim's other sister participated in the Beslan school hostage massacre. Years later, Girkin admitted that he had, quote, fought against the local population in Chechnya. There was also a leak of emails supposedly written by Girkin, in which he explained that, quote, the people we captured and questioned almost always disappeared without a trace and without going to court. Girkin then remained off the international radar for several years, but reportedly continued to work for the FSB until March 2013. However, his role as an agent for Russian interests was just getting started. The next year, Girkin, again using the pseudonym Strelkov, emerged as the leader on the ground of the Russian separatist activities in Crimea. Despite votes by the Crimean parliament and populace designed to give Russia's annexation a veneer of legitimacy, Girkin was open about the reality in an interview the next year, saying that his special forces, quote, collected the Crimean deputies for the vote, having to, quote, forcibly drive the deputies to vote for annexation by Russia. Girkin then recruited Crimeans and other volunteers in preparation for the Donbass War. Girkin was on the ground directing events in the first days of the conflict, as his separatist forces seized Donetsk and Sloviansk, taking over the executive buildings of each and installing authorities hand-picked by Girkin. Another such rebellion was attempted in Kharkiv, which was put down, and later in Lugansk, where the separatists would dig in. Unlike in Crimea, at this point, Russian special forces and regular forces were not yet involved in the Donbass. It was only Girkin's volunteers and the local separatist militias, and Girkin was essentially the ultimate authority in the breakaway republics. This was later made official when his old friend Borodai, now serving as one of the Kremlin-installed leaders of the Donbass, appointed him as supreme commander of the Donetsk People's Republic forces, once again under the pseudonym Strelkov. Behind the front lines, Girkin now reprised his counterinsurgency role, this time in the Donbass republics. This led to yet more accusations of forced disappearances, with an intercepted communication later released by Ukrainian authorities in which an officer identified as Strelkov orders his men to dispose of a prisoner's body. The same body was later found in a river, badly mutilated. This was confirmed to be Volodymyr Rybak, a local Ukrainian politician who, alongside a 19-year-old college student, had been seen on videotape getting kidnapped, presumably by Girkin's men. Girkin would later admit to extrajudicial killings in the Donbass, but denied using torture or mutilation. Now coming to the world's attention, Girkin was sanctioned for the first time on April 28th, the day after his promotion to Supreme Commander. The sanctions were imposed by the European Union bloc and were originally listed as pertaining to Strelkov, though it eventually became clear who this was. Despite this, the summary kidnappings and executions in the Donbass continued. Ukraine would then launch its counterattack, the anti-terrorist operation. By July, they'd retaken Mariupol, then forced a reluctant retreat by Strelkov's forces from Sloviansk. Ukrainian command was criticized for allowing the rebels to escape encirclement, to which Ukraine responded that Girkin was using human shields during their midnight retreat. Girkin, meanwhile, caught criticism from some Russian commenters, accusing him of betraying a supposed oath to fight to the death in Sloviansk. Girkin soon had much bigger problems. On July 17th, Girkin posted on social media that his forces had shot down a Ukrainian cargo plane using a Buk missile system, emphasizing that his forces had repeatedly warned the Ukrainians not to fly over their territory. The post was quickly deleted once it was revealed that the plane had been a passenger airliner, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, en route from the Netherlands to Kuala Lumpur. All 298 on board would perish in the shootdown, prompting international outrage and an immediate investigation by the Dutch government. It forced Russia to further distance itself from the Donbass republics and to not fully follow through with its plans for the region, at least in this war. Despite distancing itself from the Donbass war, thereby effectively throwing Girkin under the bus for the shootdown, Russia did also promote Girkin's alternative explanation, in which there was no shootdown and his rebels had no part in the crash. The idea being that the plane's autopilot was programmed to crash over the Russian proxy's territory in Ukraine and had been pre-filled with rotting corpses. Russia's endorsement of this story sparked even further outrage in the Netherlands and the rest of the world, further making the situation in Donbass untenable. In mid-August, Girkin was removed from command as part of a larger shakeup of the Donbass republics, supposedly conducted by the FSB amidst the fallout from the plane shootdown and the recent military reverses. Girkin moved back to Moscow, but had now gained international infamy as one of the world's most wanted men. Over the next several years, litigation of all types was filed in jurisdictions all around the world against Girkin. The most notable was in the Netherlands, where the flight had originated and where the majority of passengers had been citizens. The Dutch carried out a 4-year investigation, though Russia and its proxies granted them little access to the crash site. However, there was an abundance of evidence implicating Girkin, not just his quickly deleted social media post about shooting down a cargo plane, but also additional messages about appropriating the victims' possessions on behalf of the Donbass republics. In 2022, Girkin was convicted in absentia of 298 counts of murder by a Dutch court. Thus, he is unable to enter or traverse through any country that has an extradition treaty with the Netherlands. Despite being shielded from international prosecution by the regime of Vladimir Putin, Girkin became disillusioned with Russian leadership. In the Donbass, the Kremlin had created defensible front lines, then signed a ceasefire to freeze the conflict, continuing to disassociate itself from the rebel republics. This was largely on account of Girkin's own actions, primarily the plane shootdown. However, Girkin was fed up with the fact that, as he saw it, the status quo in Donbass favored the Western European allies over Russia. Girkin created the Russian National Movement, a party rejecting Putin's regime as too soft and demanding that all former Soviet republics be brought under Russia's, quote, unconditional control. Eventually, of course, Putin's regime did escalate in Ukraine, launching their full-scale invasion in February 2022. Like many other ex-military and special forces figures, Girkin began live blogging his commentary on the war. As Russian forces quickly found themselves in a quagmire, Girkin and other military bloggers became highly critical of Kremlin leadership, particularly against the Defense Ministry and Sergei Shoigu. Like others engaging in such criticism, such as the Wagner Group's Yevgeny Prigozhin, who we've previously covered, Girkin was protected by some factions within the regime against retaliation by those factions he criticized. As Ukraine carried out their large-scale counterattacks in the fall of 2022, Girkin suggested that Shoigu should be executed and proposed use of tactical nuclear weapons to, quote, drive 20 million refugees west. To this end, in April 2023, Girkin formed another ultra-nationalist organization, the Club of Angry Patriots. Later in the spring, however, it was Prigozhin's criticism that was making the most noise. Girkin seemed to realize he could be in a vulnerable position if the conflict between Prigozhin and the defense establishment escalated beyond repair. He began criticizing Prigozhin, accusing him of fomenting a coup, evidently trying to distance himself from past criticism of the Kremlin and stake his position on their side should such a coup occur and fail. Sure enough, the month following this comment, Prigozhin launched his putsch. As Girkin had feared, the regime in Moscow did not collapse and began cracking down on what it now referred to as extremists. The Kremlin had realized that some of the more zealous pro-war elements could represent a threat, as demonstrated by Prigozhin. Girkin undoubtedly fell into this category, but he seemed to hold out hope that his recent public criticisms of Prigozhin would keep the Kremlin off his back. This wasn't to be, and on July 21, 2023, Igor Girkin was arrested by Russian authorities and charged with, quote, extremism. Thus, while continuing to be sheltered from international prosecution, one of the world's most wanted war criminals became a victim of the same regime he had victimized so many others on behalf of. Girkin remains alive in prison as of the making of this video, yet his future is in the hands of the Kremlin. We'll continue to follow this story. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment. For more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button so you know when the next video is posted. Be sure to check out the project that forms the basis for these videos at apoliticalworldmap.org. And if you can, please sign up for our Patreon to keep the videos coming. Thanks again for watching. I'm Alex. I am out.